I'm typing up the MyBookie read. Sorry. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Dynasty Tradecast, brought to you this week by MyBookie.com. As always, I'm your host, Eric Bertzloff, better known on Twitter as @DynastyTrades, joined by my co-host, Nathan. What's going on, Poop Eater?
Oh, the poop is in the air, boys and girls. It's not a good day for the Nate Dogg. And also, I see that it's written down in the document incorrectly, and you keep on saying it incorrectly. It's mybookie.ag, the wonderful folks at mybookie.ag.
It's true. Sorry, I've been programmed through my entire life to do .com, and yeah, don't mind me just ruining our own sponsorship deal with mybookie.ag. Well, with that being said, we have a guest today. It's the other half of the Dynasty Crossroads podcast, right? And that is Jake Anderson. What's up, man?
What's going on, guys? How you doing tonight?
Doing well. We had Pete on 2-3 weeks ago, Nathan.
It was 2 weeks ago.
And I was not there for that. So this is now Dan is in.
Right. And mostly Dan is out and Jake is in. And I'm very disappointed that Jake does not have a British accent. So
yeah, it's hard to live up to that kind of that stage that Peter sets with just his accent. I mean, we get to see all of his misspellings on Twitter, and his accent just makes up for all of those.
No, it's exactly true. I listened to that pod when I wasn't on it, and yeah, I was like, man, this is a classy pod. So I'm happy to hear that we got a guest who's not going to threaten me with class. That's what I'm excited about.
I assure you.
Well, as Nathan alluded to, Mike Davis did in fact become the bell cow this weekend, thanks to a Chris Carson injury. And I'm not gonna go program the opening of the show again, Nathan. I'm actually not gonna make you eat dog poop. Dan, if he was here, he's mean. He'd make you eat dog poop. I guess, what will you say you've learned? Have you maybe learned not to make such hyperbolic free bets about dog poop, or what is it? What is it you've learned?
I will say I've learned. I will say that for the most part, I'm a person who lives up to his bets. Like, I honestly feel bad that I'm not eating dog poop right now.
I really don't. I don't need it.
But I'm not doing it for. I wouldn't. If I were to do it, it wouldn't be for you. It'd be to live up to my own bets, because I'm a man who believes in paying off your bets. So I will make a promise that from now on, if I make a stupid bet on this podcast, it would be something that I can actually live up to without harming myself health wise.
Interesting. Actually, I would be curious to have a doctor's recommendation as if eating dog poop could, in fact, harm a full-grown adult human being who's 17 years old. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's actually the case. I've never tried it. I've never seen someone do that before.
Well, isn't there talk like there's that farts help prevent cancer? So eating dog poop has to even be better than that for you.
Yeah, dude. Get on that level, Nathan.
All right. I'll give you guys a quick reminder that you can support the RotoViz Radio Network and our 10 shows per week on Patreon. By doing so, you'll gain exclusive access to RotoViz Live, our weekly Sunday morning video show answering all your fantasy questions. Patronships start at just $5 per month and provide exclusive access to RotoViz Live. That's 4 shows per month on top of 40 podcasts for just $5. Become a RotoViz Radio Patreon today to join an exclusive community of listeners, access premium content, and do your part in helping the network grow and continue to produce high-quality, industry-leading programming.
Yeah, and as we tell you every week, as a loyal listener of this podcast, you can get a 30% off discount to RotoViz NFL Pass right now. It's available through the NFL Podcast homepage, rotoviz.com/podcast. The season is here. It's basically already through, but that's not true. You can win. So make sure that you're ready, and RotoViz is a great way to do that for both in-season and off-season coming up. So again, unlimited access to our NFL content and tools, so you can get amazing value, support the podcast network. Once again, that's RotoViz/podcast.
All right, let's circle back to the fantasy side of Mike Davis just for a second. I know that Eric, Dan, and I have talked about it quite a bit over the last few weeks. But Jake, what are your thoughts on Mike Davis as a long-term asset? Is he more of a guy that's just taking advantage of a situation where he's put in right now with injuries and the coaching staff not trusting Rashad Penny yet, or do you think Mike Davis is a legitimate play over the next couple of seasons?
I mean, Mike Davis is a player that I really liked when he was drafted by the 49ers. He's a guy that's got a little bit of a belly on him. So being a guy with a little bit of a belly on him, I appreciate that he can still perform athletically the way he does.
Still little belly can perform on the podcast. That's
right. That's right. And I mean, he's kind of a chubby guy, but I think he looks really athletic for his size. Like when you watch him on tape, you wouldn't think he'd have the burst or the agility that he does. I think he's just a really good player. He can catch the ball. He's a really well-rounded player. He's got good vision. So I just kind of enjoy that Rashad Penny's the third best running back on his team when they drafted him in the first round. But as far as long-term value, I don't know if he's ever going to be a 1A type of player, but I think he's definitely plenty good to possibly be a 1B on a team. I don't know. I'm sure his ceiling is limited, but I do like the player.
Yeah, I mean the draft pedigree is what always interested me, and ultimately why I made a statement that if you're really desperate in a league, which led to the poop bet of Mike Davis, is maybe you could roster Mike Davis, and that was kind of where I always hung my hat at, 4th round pick on a team that seems starved, and a bad coach, I'd like to point out too. So maybe he's been holding him back, or maybe he drafted a running back in the 1st round and I don't know, not use him at all, and maybe that would happen. A full Bishop Sankey situation happening here, but yeah, I personally like Davis a lot, but I don't know that he's anything more than a flash in the pan this year. But he has anytime he's gotten double-digit carries essentially this year, he's gone for 28 in week 4, 15 in week 5, 17 in week 9. It looks like he's got it and should be able to produce if he does get the role, even with his little bit of belly there. Nathan, you want to come around, say Mike Davis is on one of your squads these days?
Oh, he is. I won a game with Mike Davis on my line. I had to hedge my bets by acquiring him right after I said that. So I mean that's just happened.
Every league is what you're saying?
No, just one league. But yeah, with Mike Davis, I pretty much just think he's a this year type thing. I don't think he's going to go into next year as the lead back in Seattle. I think that Penny eventually is going to be the lead back in Seattle with that 1st round draft pedigree, more so than a 4th round in another team, Eric. But
sure. I mean, I agree. I'm just saying he has talent, and the dynasty community was interested in him. He was not a nobody going into draft season.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, he had some Devy hype the year before he got drafted as well.
He kind of reminds me of what Alex Collins was, where everybody kind of completely slept on Collins, but he had a lot of pedigree, and then kind of has started to emerge. Now, do I think he's going to have that kind of success? I do not. I think I'm with you, Nathan. I think he is going to be a backup somewhere else, and he'll be another situation of if there's an injury, Mike Davis becomes relevant. But the truth of the matter is, for the next couple of years, he's probably on your roster or a roster.
All right, let's move on to our next topic, and it's going to be Mr. Nick Mullins. I will be honest with you. I did not know who Nick Mullins was last Wednesday. I certainly did not.
Bet on that one, man.
Yeah, but I did start him on Thursday in a Superflex league because I had Beathard as my only quarterback as a bye weeks. So anyways, Nick Mullins, is he a guy who starts the rest of the year for the Niners after what he's shown? Is there any chance he gives Jimmy Garoppolo a run, or is this just, it was one game against the terrible Raiders? Go with Jake first.
Go ahead, Jake. I should hand it to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main talking point there is that he was facing a team that is obviously tanking for next year. It wants to get rid of its best players. It wants to accumulate as many draft picks as possible. They are tanking, and I've said it on Twitter that John Gruden definitely plays dynasty football, because if you're going to lose, you might as well go all the way and lose. So
I've said it on this podcast before. John Gruden, the Nathan Powell of
But Nathan Powell would never sign Jordy Nelson and Doug Martin, though. So
that's true. You would go for more Devy picks.
Done.
Yeah, I mean, well, and just a pivot off of what you said, Jake. As far as playing teams you're tanking, I'm just going to throw out his schedule in the upcoming weeks, and that is the Giants, the Bucks, Seattle, which isn't tanking, mind you, Broncos, and Seattle again. I mean, I don't know. Out of the next 5 weeks, it looks like he's going to have a couple teams that are tanking again, and I do think he managed to work himself into the starting role and looked well prepared and looked good. But yeah, it's probably very, very easy to look good against that team on a short week.
Yeah, no, I don't want to take anything away from him. He looked really good. I mean, they talked extensively how prepared this guy is. It seems like he's one of those quarterbacks that lives and breathes football and puts in more work than even the starter or the coach does. Yeah. So he's going to take advantage of the opportunity he gets. He's got some talent. I've went back and watched some of his college film. He's a guy that, likes to throw it down the seam, likes the middle of the field. I don't know if he has the arm strength to really stretch the perimeter of the field, the sidelines. But there was an interesting stat. I don't think any of his completions came with a defender within 1 yard of the completed pass, which is just like, how do you even evaluate that kind of performance? But
how do you come up with that stat? I guess that's
PFF.
Kudos to you.
Or no, next gen stats.
Yeah, next gen now.
I understand.
So I mean, the schedule is definitely enticing. I picked him up in a bunch of leagues for free. I actually had Beathard, and I thought I switched him in, but so I had no quarterback this week in that league, which was great. But besides that, I think he's a guy that if you're desperate for quarterback help that you might be plugging in over the next few weeks, I think he's probably going to hold on to that job. But let's say if he has a really, really poor performance, I think they wouldn't have a problem putting CJ Beathard back in there either.
And I mean, I think that's the thing is like, I think he probably is fighting for this job the rest of the go around this year. But I mean, the thing that happened last week with him is he just solidified like a backup role or a third string role in the NFL for the foreseeable future, the next couple of years. He just got himself a couple $1 million. I'm not sure that there's much analysis beyond that. If you're in a super flex league, as Nathan said, he's a deep dive, and he was a really deep dive even before he broke out. But I don't think he's going to be. If he's starting, then he has immediate value in super flex leagues. But I don't anticipate him ever overtaking Jimmy G, which I think you asked the question, Nathan, right off the bat. I don't think that that's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't see that in his range of outcomes either, especially with the big contract Jimmy G had, but also because Jimmy G is much better at football than he is. But in general, I think the play here is that if you're competing, you kind of just you use Mullins if you're desperate for a quarterback. If you're not competing, or if you have the quarterback depth, this is a very easy, like, if I'm competing and I need a quarterback in Superflex, I'm fine throwing like a late second or early third in Nick Mullins. But and the same token, if I have the depth or if I'm not competing, I'll take that pick every day of the week and twice on Sunday for Mullins. So basically, if you need Mullins, then trade a late pick for him. If you don't need Mullins, trade away him for a late pick.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's go ahead and move on and talk about the guy on the I think we talked about a trade. Maybe it was off. I can't remember now, but for Devonta Freeman, I think it was actually for James Conner. Kudos to you, Jake Anderson. Kudos to you. But this is the opposite end of that, and that is Tevin Coleman. Looked really good this week. So I'll throw to Nathan here. What are you doing with Tevin, Nathan? It looks like he might have either have a ton of free agency value or actually have solidified a role in this offense, even with Freeman's contract.
Yeah, it was always a conversation after the Jerick McKinnon signing, where Jerick McKinnon rose up into the top 7, top 8 running backs in Dynasty, being sold for a couple first-round picks in some leagues. That type of valuation, people were like, okay, who's the next Jerick McKinnon? And everyone pointed to Tevin Coleman and Duke Johnson. Duke Johnson signs a long-term extension. He's going to be competing. Obviously, we'll talk about Duke in a little bit as well, but he's going to be competing with Chubb for touches in the long term. And now Tevin Coleman, he is not signed long-term, and he's going to be the pending free agent. And if Jerick McKinnon basically tripled his value upon signing with the Niners, just imagine what Tevin Coleman's going to do when he signs to have a backfield all to himself, because he's going to get a top 5 RB salary type contract, because that's what happened with McKinnon, because most of the top running backs are still on their rookie contract. So Tevin Coleman's going to be paid as a top 6, top 7 running back in the worst case scenario. And then his nice value, it's kind of hard to envision it skyrocketing because it's already building crescendo towards that.
Where is it? I'll stop you there, Nathan. Where is the value right now for Tevin? I'm actually kind of interested.
I don't think anyone is selling for less than an early first.
An early first?
Yeah, I think that selling him for a mid first it doesn't make much sense.
I feel like his value is right around the mid first area, but I mean, I can't disagree with you. But I don't know that Twitter is caught up yet, or your league mates have caught up yet.
Well, they should. All right, Jake, what are your takes on Tevin and his pending free agency?
Yeah, I mean, Tevin Coleman is an extremely explosive guy in space. His highlight tape is extremely impressive. He lacks 2 traits that I am obsessed with running backs, and it's vision and contact balance. And he really doesn't show those. I don't think he's ever going to be a 1A in a backfield. I think the hype surrounding him is that he's going to be bell cow type of back, whoever signs him next year. And I don't see that. I like the player. I think I'm lower than the consensus is. So I'd be looking at opportunities to sell high. And if this is the week where you own him, maybe float out offers. But again, I think you're risking a little bit of upside on this offseason. That I think this offseason, regardless of where he goes to, his value is going to increase because people like new situations, new toys. And but yeah, he's a guy that I would be looking to sell when the value is the highest.
Let me ask you, if you're selling, what type of player deal, and I'll put you on the spot here, Jake, what kind of player deal are you kind of looking for or looks enticing to you if you're a Tevin owner, or maybe you are and you're like trying to shop him right now? Maybe a James Conner type trade?
Oh, that'd be – I would give a first – I would trade Tevin Coleman and a first for.
Oh, Jake, stop that! Do not. No.
Easily. James Conner's a top 20 dynasty startup asset right now.
That's so bad.
James Conner's a top
Jake,
20.
We get along so well.
Oh my god.
Tevin Coleman
and a first. Okay,
I do think that's a bit nuts. I think that's a bit on that, but it's not crazy. But Coleman could end up being what, a top 35 player in dynasty, so adding a first to it's probably in the ballpark, right?
Well, the difference there is I from my perspective, James Conner is going to be deservedly so in that top 20. Tevin Coleman is a guy that's probably going to be in that top 36, top 3 rounds probably next offseason. I don't think his value is there. Now, would I trade Tevin Coleman in an early first for James Conner? Probably not. Would I trade a late first in Tevin Coleman for James Conner? Absolutely, because I believe in the talent. I'll take that deal all day because I think people are still, just like Nathan here, are a little bit down on James Conner, maybe not believing that
I'm not down. I'm undowning on James Conner. I think he's a very good NFL player. I think he's a top 10 dynasty running back. I don't think he's worth Tevin Coleman and a first round rookie pick.
Okay, let me just throw out some names and let me ask a question on if you're making trade offers for Tevin. And I think selling him here, I think I'm completely on board with you, Jake. I think that this is the peak of his range of outcomes, is being the bell cow in Atlanta and an explosive offense while Freeman is hurt. This is the time to sell. So would you be doing Coleman for Michelle? Which side would you want?
I'd want Michelle there.
Let's just ask the question, Coleman or Freeman?
Coleman.
That's tough. I'm a huge Devontae Freeman fan. I actually sold Tevin Coleman and Anthony Miller before the season started for Devontae Freeman in a points per carry league, and I was absolutely thrilled about it. I love Freeman. I've sold a couple of the shares just because I'm competing in a bunch of leagues. I'm worried about his health, but I also think people are probably worried more than I am. That's tough, but I think I'd take Freeman there personally.
Okay, what about Chubb?
I would take Chubb for sure.
Oh, Chubb, yeah, for sure.
I feel like Chubb's an easy selection there. But if you're looking at the ADP for this month, Chubb and Coleman are literally right next to each other right now.
And that's even before free agency, so yeah.
So just saying that there's a value there. So okay, let's go ahead and move on, unless you had anything else, Nathan, on that particular topic. You're shaking your head. You do not. It came out that AJ Green in the bye weeks actually had a more serious injury than he was letting on. Looks like he is going to miss, I believe what the last report was, at minimum 2 weeks. Sounds like it could be a bit of sandbagging there, and it could be significantly, I don't know about significantly more, but a decent bit more. So I guess the question becomes, with AJ's injury, what's the implication? Who pops out? Is it a buy moment? A 30-year-old wide receiver getting injured for the year or significantly injured is bad news, or maybe it's a buy low because of that. I will kick to Jake first.
Sure. I mean, I think AJ Green has been a buy for a long time. Any of these wide receivers that are over the age of 26 are tremendous values. Julio, AB, they put up the production, more production than these younger wide receivers, yet you can get discounted. So as a guy that plays almost basically year to year in dynasty leagues because I want to win, and I'll worry about next year, I think it's definitely a buying window. I actually acquired a bunch of AJ Green during this year. Yeah. One share last week, which I'm a little bit hurt by, and I've actually floated a bunch of offers potentially trading him, but that's because I'm 8-0. I want to win. I'm a little bit worried about this year. Long term, I'm less worried. So I think it's definitely a buy now window or a buy low window. I don't think it's a desperation sell.
Well, if you're competing, is this a guy that if you're 8-0, for example, it looks like he'll be ready for the playoffs? Is this somebody that maybe if he's on a team that looks like it's going to start going the way of Old Yeller, that's take the team out back and shoot it with a shotgun? Is that the type of player that you would be interested in kind of targeting to make that playoff push?
Well, now that the fact that it's come out that he doesn't need surgery, I think that's huge. I mean, that was last night. I sent out about 20 offers with AJ Green included to trade away because I was really worried that if this is surgery, he's done for the year. I need production this year. Luckily, a bunch of people, and I thought they were really strong offers that I sent out. They all got declined so far. So as long as he's going to be coming back, I think it's definitely a guy to go acquire.
Yeah, my take on the AJ Green, Tyler Boyd situation is that this is the selling opportunity for Tyler Boyd. I have a bajillion Tyler Boyd shares, as everyone on this podcast knows. Yep. But I do think that his upside is capped. I mean, AJ Green's going to be a Bengal for life, as if anything accounts for it. And Tyler Boyd has had a few big weeks this year that might suggest to you he has like a wide receiver 1 type upside. As much as I like Boyd, I don't see him as that type of player. I see him as more of, a low end wide receiver 2 in Dynasty. And so if you can try and get up into that wide receiver 1 range, like even if you can do like a Boyd for a Cooper, a Boyd plus for Amari Cooper has a better shot at a wide receiver 1 type, ceiling than a Boyd does.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the exact right take. And as somebody who loves Boyd, that's very honorable of you to finally realize that it's time to, jump ship and take. So I guess let me ask the question before I go into maybe pivots away from Boyd while Green's out. Is there what valuation as a person who owns Boyd in a ton of places are you like looking value wise? Are you looking for like mid-first valuation at this point to cash out?
Oh, no. I mean, it kind of depends on what if it's a 19 first and, what my team is looking like. I mean, I'll just give you my real life example. Today I was offered the Powell guy from the Lions and a 2020 first for Boyd, and that was an easy no. In an attempt of just showing, hey, I need more, I countered Kirk and a first in that 2020 first for Boyd, and that was a no. And then he came back with Cohen and a second for Boyd, and that was a no as well. So that was just a bunch of no's, but that was basically the only Boyd exchange I've had recently, and that was it.
I mean, I'd argue Cohen in a second is close to that as a mid-late first at this point. Not after the dud of a weekend, maybe, but I mean that we were talking about that being in the first range valuation last week, I believe.
Yeah, I mean that's fine, but it's a different ball game between Cohen in a second and a first because I see the first as that has more upside than Cohen in the second.
Okay, fair enough. Well, let me pivot then and ask just a question before we hop off of this because I've seen a ton of people picking up Josh Malone in my leagues, and he's still on the waiver wire in a couple leagues. Is there anybody that you're picking up to kind of fill that role in the Bengals offense, which just seemed a bit explosive? Is Malone somebody that interests you guys kind of going forward here with age for a couple weeks?
I mean, he's the only guy that's on waivers that you'd be interested in picking up. John Ross is there, Uzuma is rostered everywhere. So I mean, I've picked him up in a bunch of spots, especially the rosters that I have AJ, just because we've seen it with these players. And Josh Malone has actually flashed. He's had some productive games.
Another 4th round draft pick, by the way.
I mean, in dynasty leagues, anybody on the waiver wire is worth a shot. If they're going to get some playing time. We saw Powell from the Lions get swept up everywhere last week without doing a damn thing this week. So I think Malone is definitely a guy that you want to pick up for free off your dynasty waiver wires and see what happens.
Yeah, and this is just the pessimistic view in me, but I have a bunch of Josh Malone and some like deep basketball dynasties, and I just know that this is going to be the Alex Erickson show, so no one cares. All right, let's move on to our next topic, and it's going to be the aforementioned Duke Johnson. He did sign that long-term extension with the Browns. He started the season not great because that guy Hugh Jackson was terrible at using Duke Johnson in the passing game along with Todd Haley, so I think
that guy Hugh Jackson on TV though seems to think that guy Hugh Jackson, the coach, did a pretty decent job and kind of screwed out his role. Did you see that? Yeah.
Yeah. So Duke Johnson, I think that obviously what we saw from him this past week, that is like the ceiling of his role. And as Chubb, gets more of a cemented role, the Johnson, rushing role will decrease as well. But I do think that we'll just see, from my perspective, I think that Johnson's the perfect best ball back. It's really going to be hard to, trust him week to week. He's not going to have a bunch of 17, 18-point games, but he'll have one of those every few weeks. And, I just don't really like relying on guys that are all receiving upside and you're not really relying on the rushing, which seems to more have a higher floor.
I mean, Duke's probably Gio Bernard without the running upside, but he's the role behind Mixon, which Gio's startable in places. Duke, and I've said it on the podcast before, has never really intrigued me. Don't really own him anywhere, but I mean, what Hugh Jackson was doing to him was criminal. I think if I'm looking at the points, he's had 3, 5, 4, 13, 5, 14, 6, 3, and then he's got 30 this week after Hugh's gone. It's like, well, that is telling. So I mean, he's a very talented football player, but he as you mentioned, Nathan, he's tough to stick in your starting lineup, especially if it's not PPR.
Jake.
Yeah, I mean, Duke Johnson's obviously a talented guy. He was he close to an RB1 last year?
Yeah, he was like RB13.
I mean, he's shown that talent, and some of these running backs come down to usage and volume, and we just don't know what's going to happen in that offense. Obviously, this is a great sell high time if you were looking to get out of that stock, but they're not going to play the Chiefs every week either and be down by several scores. So he's not going to get that many targets. He's not going to get that kind of volume. He's obviously not going to get 2 touchdowns very often. But, he could be a guy that's that nice, satellite back that's a safe low-end RB2. It's just there's probably people that are valuing him higher than I am at this point.
Yeah, I agree completely. Well, let me tell you guys about our sponsor, mybookie.ag. I'm not sure if you guys saw the news this weekend, but the sports book in Vegas, the sports books in Atlantic City, they all took a bath, and unfortunately, I assume our sponsor did as well. Mybookie.ag is a sports book that is – oh, wow, I'm screwing this read up. I'm trying to get cute here. I'm the worst at this read. Nathan, do you want to take this read?
Where is it? Is it on the doc?
Yeah, it's here. It's just so poorly written, and I tried to rewrite it.
Okay.
And I added the top part, so feel free to go bananas with whatever.
All right, here we go. All right, I want to take a little bit of time to talk about our good friends, our sponsor, mybookie.ag. We wouldn't be here without them. And watching football is fun, but it's more entertaining when you have some action on the games. You've heard me talking about it for weeks, and some of you are still on the sidelines. What are you doing on the sidelines? You're playing like a backup quarterback with your headset on. Take the headset off, put your helmet on. What?
I said, especially after this week. I mean, if you were on the sidelines this last week, you lost out on a lot of action.
Absolutely. Whether you're an expert or a rookie, you should be betting at MyBookie. If you're the kind of guy that likes to bet a little and win a lot, like playing the numbers or on roulette, you can create a big parlay. Pick 3 teams to win, and if you hit all 3, you can turn $100 into $600. There's so much to bet on. There's playoff baseball's over, but you got basketball, you got hockey, you got huge UFC, all types of stuff like that. I recommend these guys because I really trust them. MyBookie has been in the business for over many years. They've got great online reviews, and their mobile site is easy to use. I always say the best part is the easy-to-use mobile site. MyBookie will offer a 100% bonus for 1 more week this year. That's right. Have you ever been thinking about placing a pick all season but haven't manned up yet? Or it's time to make your move. After Sunday's kickoff, you can kiss that bonus goodbye. That's promo code ROTOVIZ, ROTOVIZ, promo code ROTOVIZ. 100% bonus match. Get in on the action.
Yeah, we screwed it up again. I'm looking at the read, and it's 50% off.
Jesus.
They change this read every week, by the way, on us, Jake. I don't know if you.
That's brutal. That's
all right.
brutal.
All right, your turn to try that then.
Do you want me to go? Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, guys, with that said, let's go ahead and tell you guys about our sponsor, mybookie.ag. I mentioned them at the top of the show, and we all know that watching football is fun, but it's more entertaining when you've got some action on the game, and you've heard us talking about it for weeks, really weeks at this point. And some of you are still on the sidelines. If you waited this last week on the sidelines, you're you obviously missed out. I don't know if you saw all the articles, if you saw all the tweets, the sports books were losing big. So whether you're an expert or a rookie, you should be betting at mybookie.ag. It's the easy way to bet sports. So if you're the kind of guy who wants to bet a little and win a lot, you can create big parlays by picking 3 teams to win. And if you hit all 3, you could turn $100 into as much as $600. It's pretty good. So there's so much to bet on. You can do basketball, hockey, UFC, you name it. I think there's even Trump bets on there if you want to make bets. My bookie is the one bet I know you'll be happy with all year. I recommend these guys because I really trust them. They've been in the business for years. They've got great online reviews, and their mobile site is so easy to use. So backed by popular demand, my bookie will be offering a 50% bonus for 1 more week this year. That's right. Have you been thinking about placing that big bet and haven't manned up yet? Well, maybe you're tired of being off the sidelines like last week. Well, it's time to make your move. So after Sunday's kickoff, you can kiss this bonus goodbye. So make sure you follow at BetMyBookie on Twitter and Instagram. They personally respond to every mention in DM. Not to mention they've given away nearly $10,000 in free money to their followers this football season. You'll be the first to know as soon as new odds and props are posted. So log on to MyBookie right now. Don't miss out on the last opportunity to collect the industry-leading biggest bonus. Use promo code ROTOVIZ. That's ROTOVIZ, ROTOVIS, and we'll match your first deposit 50%. That's promo code ROTOVIS, ROTOVIZ. You'll play, you win, you get paid.
Hey, Eric, RotoViz is ROTOVIZ.
What did I say?
You said S twice.
Yeah.
All right, let's continue on to this show.
Let me do the last part then, if that's the case, and then I'll just edit it in.
Oh, we could have just kept on going. No one would have cared.
I mean, it's 2 seconds. All right. So log on to MyBookie right now. Don't miss out on our last opportunity to collect the industry-leading biggest bonus. Use RotoViz as your code, and we'll match your first week up to 50%. That's RotoViz. You play, you win, you get paid.
All righty, let's get into our second half of topics. And our first topic is going to be George Kittle. We were talking about, I think either last week or the week before, about the class of 2017 tight ends of O.J. Howard, Evan Ingram, and David Njoku. But really the guy that's kind of been lost and, it was unlost by Nick Mullins was George Kittle. So we can start with Jake here. Has George Kittle moved himself into the conversation with those tight ends into maybe a top 6, top 7 tight end? Or are you pumping the brakes here on some of this George Kittle hype?
I honestly think that 6 and 7 is a little bit too low. I think he's vaulted himself. And you were talking to the biggest Evan Ingram truther on the planet. I think he's right in that discussion with Evan Ingram, right at the top of those rookie tight ends from last season. We know how athletic this guy was. He was an insane blocker at Iowa, and now he's putting up huge numbers. I don't see how you can say he's not a top 5 type dynasty tight end right now.
I mean, yeah. Your take, I think, is pretty much spot on here. I think he's tied with Evan Ingram and O.J. Howard probably, but the rest of the class is pretty far behind that in kind of what we've seen thus far. Kittle really is looking like he's the real deal. And most tilting of all is what I'll say is I own 0 shares of Kittle, which is insanely frustrating.
Especially when you could get him in like the 4th round.
I know. Thank you, John.
I have 0 shares too, so I feel you.
Oh, it's so brutal. And I usually pounce on those guys, the very late round tight ends too, and I just ended up with none of them. It's the guys like Ingram and Howard that I stay away from because they're too expensive, and you got to hold them on your roster forever.
Yeah, and always Ryan McDowell spot on with whenever a player like this breaks out, he always does a bunch of random polls, versus some guys that you wouldn't think would be in the conversation. But I think he did a poll with Rob Gronkowski, and I think it was like 75% for George Kittle. I think that's a little bit much, but yeah, I mean, you might be right, Jake, that I was a little low at tight end 6-7. I think that honestly, that class 2017 tight ends could very easily be like the top 4 tight ends by the end of like 2019. So yeah, I'm definitely high on pretty much all those guys now, and I'm trying to get higher on George Kittle, but my draft capital bias is just leaning more towards those higher drafted tight ends. But honestly, right now, you said you were a fan and you don't really have any shares. If you had any shares, would you be trying to sell right now, or you think that the hype really hasn't caught up with the points yet?
Yeah, I don't think the hype has quite got there yet. I mean, if I think he's a top 5 tight end. I mean, and that's a great thing about these young tight ends that are actually producing is they're young, they're producing, and you're probably needing them on your roster because the tight end landscape is just absolutely garbage year in and year out. So he's a guy that I'm probably holding unless I get blown away by an offer.
Yeah, he kind of reminds me of Travis Kelce, and I'm trying to pull this up, where Kelce was kind of slept on for a couple years while he developed, and then he just exploded onto the scene that, what was it, 2014, and now he's the tight end one, and it's tough to argue against that. I feel like that's what we're watching right now, where if you're buying Kittle, I don't think his production starts to fall at all, and two, I think the ceiling is there, where if he turns into this guy, he could be the next Kelce.
Totally agree.
And so I just talked myself into going out and buying some Kittle.
There you go. All right, let's move on to our next player, and it's going to be Dalvin Cook. He returned from injury this week, had himself a big run, and according to NFL Next Gen Stats, he was the fastest ball carrier of the year so far. Pretty surprising coming off a hamstring injury. Obviously, Latavius Murray got the bulk of the volume, but I'm sure that will change after the Vikings have their bye week and Cook has more time to rest those hamstrings. Did we miss our buying window on Cook, Jake?
I don't know if it got super low. I mean, it definitely was there for a little bit. I mean, considering he was an early second round startup kind of value a couple months ago, he probably fell to maybe a mid third. What would you think?
I'd say late third, early fourth.
Okay. I mean, I don't know if he fell quite that far, but I sold a share last week, and honestly, it's a contending team where I'm, playing really well. I traded him along with some other assets for Devontae Adams, which I needed wide receiver. I felt good about it. But I mean, Dalvin Cook was a guy that I'm a huge fan. I mean, I'm a big Vikings fan, so I'm super familiar with him and that offense. I do still worry about that offensive line is not very good. The running backs, I mean, Latavius is looking as good as he probably ever has, and somehow the last few weeks, the running game has actually turned around and actually looks pretty good. But I still worry about that offensive line. I still worry about Latavius, getting some carries, getting some goal line work. So I don't know. I'm kind of wishy-washy at this point.
I mean, yeah, he's at the price tag he's at, he's probably a buy, because I think if anything proves correct, it's that watching that one run from Dalvin Cook, suddenly his value catapulted back up. So Twitter is enthralled with this man, and your teammates are too, where he is that type of explosive player, which we all knew, but we forgot over 7 weeks because it's Dynasty. And why do we remember things longer than 6 weeks? I don't know. But this is another one of those examples where I turned down offers for Cook that I now wish I had accepted because I was very short term in my mindset. And then, I mean, the injuries are still concerning, but I don't know. I mean, this is one of those things where does he get all the carries the rest of the season? Probably not. Murray's at least earned a share of those carries. So at most he's getting 70%. And we're banking on him staying healthy. So I guess I see a situation where I'm not trying to buy him, and if I have Cook, I'm not trying to sell him. So I think I'm in limbo as well. I think the valuation that he's at now is correct. I think the valuation he was at prior to this whole hullabaloo was probably way too high.
Yeah, I think that it is somewhere in the middle. And we always talk about that there are certain players that the truther is always the one that owns them. And I feel like when I was, Dalvin Cook trying to bargain shop over the last few weeks, I wasn't really getting anywhere. There weren't really many counters back on my offers. And that's not just because all my offers are terrible. It's because they didn't want to trade Dalvin Cook. So that's kind of my take, is that the truthers already have him, so it's kind of hard to acquire him. But he is definitely a guy who I think can be, a low-end RB1, high-end RB2 the rest of the season.
I think he's just a future play at this point. Like, if you're going to trade for Dalvin, you're not like, because that was the thing I was contending. I don't see the high volume for the rest of the season. So for me, I was going to trade him, probably a little bit low, but I was going to trade him because I wanted production this year. If you're a contender, he's hard to pay that much for when you're probably not going to get the Dalvin Cook we know and expect this year.
I mean, one thing that I'll float out here is, what are the chances that the Vikings realize, okay, we always need a Latavius Murray type guy to spell Cook, and we always have somebody like this. And they've realized, like almost what the Dolphins did for Miller, where they're like, okay, we're never going to fully run him out there. We're going to let him, we're going to give him 15 carries a game, and that's where they kind of set the cap at. I wouldn't be shocked if that ends up being the case, because he can't stay healthy on that bell cow role.
Or they just keep putting him out there when he's healthy, and then he gets nicked up again. I mean, that was really the only concern I had about Dalvin Cook, other than some of his play strength. But that was really the big concern coming out of FSU, was just the durability, and it's shown so far early on in his career.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's pivot over to somebody that I was sending a couple of Nathan-type polls out about last night, a couple of little intoxicated polls that I was sending out in front of the television, and that's Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I almost pulled it off, but I was calling him MVS because I didn't feel like Googling his name last night. That's how lazy I was being. But he looked athletic. He looked amazing. He looked great. He looked like the future in Green Bay. And I think that Twitter, after a primetime game, and your teammates after a primetime game, are going to start being very, very high on MVS. So let me ask Nathan, reel us back into earth, because I had a poll last night that was a first-round draft pick for Valdez-Scantling, and it was pretty much the late first round was pretty much even. The mid first round was right around 30 to 70, 25 to 70.
Yeah, and I'd say before the last couple weeks, as he has had a couple of good weeks strung together in a row, that many people would have said, okay, if you take a second rookie pick for Marquez Valdez-Scantling, you're just taking the profit and you're getting a better prospect next year. But I think that's no longer the case. You can't accept a second rookie pick for Marquez Valdez-Scantling. It has to be a first.
Yep.
And then you kind of get into the scenario where we talk. I mean, I've said this phrase 8,422 times in this podcast: worth less than a first, worth more than a second, and that's where we are with Marquez Valdez-Scantling.
Well, if that's the price tag, I'll just go out on a limb and say I'm buying there, because I think McCarthy's days are numbered, and I think that Rodgers sees the talent there as well, and the next coaching staff will as well, and maybe the current coaching staff sees the talent there. He's just unable to get enough time on the clock to actually throw him the football.
Yeah, I mean, Matt Williamson floated out Kenny Golladay type of rise in value last night. So, I mean, I'm certainly not there, but the tools are there in that offense. I mean, what does that offense need? They need a guy that can stretch the field. And if Aaron Rodgers trusts you, you are going to see the field. You're going to see opportunities, unless you're Aaron Jones. But Randall Cobb, obviously, I've always been a fan of Randall Cobb, but he has a hard time staying healthy. They've showed, with the potential trading of him this offseason, that there's some concern about him there long term. Geronimo Allison, I think, is a replacement type of talent. So foreseeably, he could be the wide receiver 2 in this offense for the next handful of years. I mean, what's the value there? I think that's easily a late first, if not. I mean, I don't think I wouldn't pay higher than that, but I think I'd pay a late first possibly for MVS.
Yeah, I certainly.
I think I'm there too. By the way, Jake, I think I'm at pay a first round draft pick for MVS. If you're contending right now, he's a player that's going to help you this year, and I think will be a value later.
Yeah, and for me, when I say that, I would struggle to do that. It's more so like it's so hard to pay that, and it's kind of the scenario where it so often burns you, where you don't want to pay the price where the guy has gone from like a third round rookie pick to a late first, but then he ends up being worth like a mid first by the offseason. So there's certainly room for his value to climb, but I think that the number of factors with there's the other young wide receivers in Green Bay. There's a potential for free agency and other draft picks. They probably aren't going to spend more draft picks after spending 3 at the wide receiver position this past year. But still, I think that his value is still volatile. He's certainly not what I would consider a safe asset quite yet.
Oh, no, and I think that's totally fair. But I think if you're contending this year, you can afford to gamble on the production now and then also gamble on the value later. I think he's the type of guy that if you're in with a philosophy Jake is listed out this entire podcast, we're trying to win. I think he's a smart buy if you still have your first left over. Although that does, you bringing up all the rookie wide receivers they drafted this year does remind me, Jamon Moore, where are you at?
I love Jamon Moore. I love taking him in the third round.
I have him in so many leagues, and it's like, well, guess those are gone.
It's like the New England backfield where you should have just taken the cheapest one with Valdes in the late fourth and just rolled with
I mean,
it.
that's what I have a number of Valdez Scantling shares, and that's the exact reason why.
I do too. I even have some. I even have some St. Brown shares where I'm just. I mean, they're all decent gambles, but there hasn't been a single sniff of more buzz, to my knowledge, that has happened to date with all these injuries.
He did have one game with like 4 catches for 98 yards or something, St. Brown, but nothing else. Let's wrap up this show with Curtis Samuel talk. Dan has said in his absence that he would like to take a victory lap on Curtis Samuel. I will not allow that because he has traded me Curtis Samuel in several leagues, so I am the bigger Curtis Samuel fan than Dan Sainio. I am draft capital till I die. Curtis Samuel, perfect example of a guy who was drafted high, and then people sour on him after a injured and porous rookie year. And honestly, he didn't really have a hot start to the season either. But now we've seen the last few weeks he's been a productive wide receiver. He's been, this just shows how many weapons Cam has now. He has Curtis Samuel, has DJ Moore, and he has Devin Funchess. So I think that obviously of those 3, Samuel would be third on that list. But I think that he is a guy who is worth like an early second right now.
Yeah, I mean that's with especially how electric he was this last game. I think that's an easy argument. I mean, his valuation in this month's ADP is right around, looking at it, Theo Riddick and Austin Hooper. Oh, and CJ Anderson in valuation. So, and actually looking at the next name on the list is MVS. Good God, things change quickly in this game. But yeah, no, you're exactly right, Nathan. I think a second round pick is going, but I think a second round pick after this game will be tough to pull off. To be perfectly honest with you.
No. I said early second, thinking like as I'm the seller, what would it take for me to part with Samuel right now?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, and I still think, I don't know. I feel like maybe you wait 2 weeks and you go after Samuel, but yeah, that's probably where you would need to be. After this week, though, I bet you they would hold your feet over the fire for a first.
Man, yeah, that's surprising to me. I mean, I like Curtis Samuel. He was a guy that was coming out of Ohio State where, he was kind of that wide receiver, running back hybrid, super explosive, but super raw as a route runner. Not a whole lot of finesse to his game. Get the guy in space and let him do his work. I don't know. I think this is kind of what he's going to be. He's going to be a monster performance and then a streak of weeks where he doesn't, see hardly any targets. I mean, I think that's the kind of player he is. I'd probably be looking to cash out if I could get that kind of evaluation on the player personally. But I see the upsides there. And Cam, this Panthers offense is starting to look really good. This is the best core talent Cam has ever had to play with. So if he works up the volume, then, the upside is immense. But I just don't see it being consistent whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, does this impact McCaffrey's value more than anything else in your guy? Like just dump off passes with an electric player?
No, nothing affects McCaffrey's value. He's a top 3-4 nice running back. So,
well, then I'll go ahead and crawl back into my hole here. All right, well, in the hole, maybe I'll wrap up the show. Nathan, you got anything else on Samuel?
No, just ask for a lot if you're going to sell him.
All right, very good. Well, just before we wrap up the show, I do want to remind everybody that I have this plate of dog poo for Nathan to have as soon as we turn off. Not really. It's not going to happen. I do want to thank our host, our host. Yeah, actually, he is the most talented podcaster currently on this podcast. So, Jake Anderson, you can follow him on Twitter at Jake Anderson FF. You can also hear him and Peter on the Dynasty Crossroads. God, why can't I think of the word podcast when we're on a podcast? Unbelievable. On the DLF network. Jake, anything else you want to plug for yourself?
No, that's it, man. I don't write a whole lot for DLF, but I'm super active on Twitter, and I really enjoy doing the podcast with Peter. We break down one play at a time from a film and analytical perspective. It's kind of a film metrics from back in the day type of vibe. And yeah, that's where you can catch me if you ever want to interact on Twitter. I'm there way more than I should be.
Fair enough. Well, on that note, go ahead and leave if you like this podcast, which I assume if you made it to this point of the show, you probably did. It would be kind of weird, like if you made it like 45 minutes through a podcast and like we're just like cringing the entire time. If you made it this far, make sure you leave us a 5-star rating and review. We always appreciate those 5-star ratings and reviews. Help listeners find us. And to be fair, the league's already over this year. If you're winning right now, if you're 8-0, nobody's catching you. So just go ahead and tell your league mates about it. 5-star ratings and reviews do help. And I guess on that note, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up. For Nathan, not Dan, and myself, we will catch up with you guys next week. And in the show, Nathan.
Oh, I forgot I was recording.